This one's caught my eye this morning. Kemi Badenoch not doing enough to win back the public. This is a Tory mayor in the Telegraph.
Yeah, I mean...
Do you agree?
Well, I think he's... no, I don't agree, but and I think, you know, he's not exactly being a great team player, is he? I mean, if I was Kemi, I'd be having him straight down to Westminster and wanting to actually, you know, have a chat with him. No, I mean,
Look, what he's saying is she's practically invisible. There's no personality. She's not out there leading. She's not getting people behind her. Come on, could do more. Yeah. Surely her homework mark should be.
Yeah, I know. I get that completely, but she gave a brilliant speech last week on net zero, and she articulated perfectly why the net zero by 2050 is actually impossible. And the reason, and what she's doing is exactly the same thing that Margaret Thatcher did and David Cameron did. You know, when you are rejected by the public, and you know, in the scale that the Conservatives were rejected, that is an instruction to go away and sort your house out. And that's exactly what she's doing. And she's saying, look, we are going to think these things through. We're not going to do what the Labour Party have done, which is or get into power with no idea, no plan as to how you're going to run the country.
In a way, Freddie, she doesn't have to do anything because Labour is shooting itself in the foot time after time.
Well, that would be the case if it wasn't for reform. Because obviously the Tories now have this major threat, existential threat, I'd say, in the shape of reform. And I think Lord Houchin is saying out loud what a lot of Tories are saying in private, which is that, is Kemi a bit rubbish? And I think, you know, in general, yes, there was a speech about net zero last week. It was good. There have been a couple of good moments. But when she was elected, it was thought she was this media phenomenon, that she would be this dynamic, punchy, forceful personality. And so far, we haven't seen that. Now, a lot of people who like Kemi Badenoch will tell you that, you know, Margaret Thatcher didn't have a great first year. You know, it took her a while to get into the role, to sort of formulate her positions and so on. And there may be some truth in that. And certainly Kemi and her team have said, you know, give us some time. The party needs a total reset. We're going to lay out interesting policies that we're going to take some time over and sort of, you know, generate a proper response to Labour. I think that's true, but you do have to take into account she doesn't seem very quick on her feet at question time, Prime Minister's questions. She is not...
I mean, to be fair, Keir Starmer always reads from his notes, doesn't he?
He does, but she's just not very good at it.
She's asking Keir Starmer serious questions, and I watched last week's PMQs. He refuses to answer any question that she puts to him. I think he's incredibly patronising, and he's reading off, you know, his sets. And some of the things he was saying last week, I think that one of the Tory MPs did a brilliant thread. He analysed about 20 or 25 porky pies from Keir Starmer in 25 minutes. He said that the interest rates were 11% under the Tories. Of course they weren't. He got totally muddled up with inflation. I mean, the guy's a joke.
And rumours swirling this morning that the triple lock could be axed.
So I think they've been quite clear that the amount that they're going to alter in the spring statement versus in the next budget, you know, this is a 25-minute statement. This is not a 2-hour statement. This, you know, they've hedged expectations a little bit on how much tax and spend is actually going to be altered in this statement. So I don't know that this is something that is coming in this statement tomorrow, but we are, as a nation, going to have a conversation about state pension provision. And that's not because pensioners are not entitled to being helped in older age. It's because there's firstly a fundamental misunderstanding about the concept of the state pension. Everybody who says that, oh, I've paid in for my whole life, unfortunately, you've been paying in for the previous generations. That's how the national insurance contribution works, is national insurance pays for current pensioners rather than what you have paid into your own pot. The triple lock of raising the state pension each year by the highest of either inflation, wages or 2.5%. Wages aren't really growing, so there's a question mark over whether or not keeping that section of the triple lock is worthwhile.
Lauren, sorry for interrupting you. A lot of people are mystified about what triple lock actually means.
Yeah.
Can you explain it to us?
So this is the promise introduced in 2011 that the state pension each year will rise by the highest of either inflation, wages, or 2.5%.
Okay.
So that is basically gold plating the state pension provision for pensioners in the United Kingdom. And we are going to reach a point over the course of the next 20 years or so where private pension provision, because of alterations to mandatory workplace pensions that were introduced over the course of the last 20 years, will see so many people have substantial end-of-career private pensions that the requirement for a state pension that can be livable for 100% of pensioners will reduce. That's a conversation that's going to be a very difficult conversation to have. It's going to be a very long-term conversation to have. This isn't an overnight conversation that we can have. But people of my generation who have been in full-time work for their whole careers have private pensions now. And that makes the end-of-life financing of my generation look very, very different. We're going to have a conversation about that, because if you look at the pie chart on the back of your tax breakdown every year, you'll see an enormous chunk of that pie chart going to welfare expenditure. That includes pension provision.
Yeah.
That is not just
the thing that
unemployed
really scares me about
personal dependent
talking about welfare provision, there's nothing for social care.
Yeah, this
That's
is
the elephant in the room, isn't it?
Financing of social care in this country is something that has been a political football that no one has wanted to touch. It's sort of the third rail of British politics. You touch it and you die. At the moment, it being split between local authorities and the health department, there's basically too many pots. It's devolved, so there are issues of duplication of workload between Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. We've got 4 systems for this rather than just the one. And this is something where end-of-life care is getting really expensive, but it is something that is required. And part of the problem that I have personally with the assisted suicide debate that's going on at the moment is we aren't talking enough about the need to significantly improve palliative care efforts in this country. And if we were, we would not be having an assisted suicide conversation at all, which is very scary for everybody who is approaching end of life.
I just am amazed. I cannot believe that we cannot approach head-on the social care bill and do something about it, because, as you said, it's the elephant in the room. And I just think when you look at what we do spend money on, and there was a poll published today which says the public believe that you could easily cut 40% off budgets, public spending budgets, without any appreciable notice that it has happened.
I think there's a common misconception that that's how the government works. It's not how the government works. I think if you consider that just in the issue of potholes, which we were talking about earlier, to fix a pothole, you have a chain of individuals involved in the process. Get rid of one of them and you accidentally create quite a large expenditure problem. There was a really great essay in the 50s by a guy whose name I've now completely forgotten. No single person can make a pencil, because of the number of people involved in making the pencil, of the graphite importers, the manufacturers of the graphite overseas, the wood producers, the carpenters, etc. No single one person can make a pencil anymore. No single one person in government can fix a pothole. There is a process that involves, who is supplying the materials to do so, who is paying for the materials to do so, who is geographically spread out across the country well enough to be able to fix every pothole in the country. Remove one element from this process, and you will accidentally significantly increase the cost of being able to fix that pothole. That's the fine balancing act of how the government works, and it's not particularly well understood.
What I'm saying, and I'd like people at home listening and watching to think about as well, we used to be able to do it. It did not used to be a problem. And then the budget has become thinner and thinner and thinner. We're spending more public money on more things. And I put it to you, we don't need to be spending. It's nice to be spending it on certain things, but we don't need to be doing things. We need our roads fixed.
If we take the pothole example a little further then, part of the reason that we no longer fix potholes the way that we do, and part of the reason that it's more expensive now, is because about 10 or so years ago, the European Union banned the use of bitumen in fixing potholes.
Is that right?
And we used to fix our potholes with bitumen, and it was a much cheaper way of doing it. It's not particularly environmentally friendly. We're probably one of the only countries in Europe that this change really altered, and because we make roads a certain way because of the amount of rain that we get versus other nations.
Didn't know that.
That increased enormously the amount of money involved in fixing roads. So every single one of these regulations that gets introduced along the way adds a cost burden. And that's why it was important for Kemi Badenoch to be talking about net zero, because every single mechanism that we do to bring us to net zero is going to cost us money. Meanwhile, China is pumping coal out into the atmosphere and is taking no steps to try and rein it in.
Growing up in Northern Ireland, we used to, you cross the border, which was 30 or 40 miles away, from Belfast. You cross the border into the Irish Republic, and you knew you'd cross the border because the roads went from being perfect in Northern Ireland to just a war zone in the Republic of Ireland. Now it is reverse.
Yeah.
They have all this European money and whatever, and their roads and their motorways and everything is all fantastic, and we are falling to pieces.
I think it's very interesting because you can make the same argument about counties in England. I'm from Gloucestershire, and until fairly recently, you used to be able to tell when you drove over the border from Wiltshire into Gloucestershire because the roads took such a significant dip as soon as you crossed the border. This is a not uncommon issue. It comes down to what governments choose to spend money on, obviously. We received a lot of European money in the United Kingdom over the course of many years. We received a chunk of it in Wales, where the Labour government in Westminster before 2010 and the Labour government in Cardiff, basically until the referendum, fully believed that that was going to be a permanent uplift to their budget and that structural funds were not something that needed to be grown out of in the way that, for example, Poland has chosen to use structural funds, which is to get to a point where they no longer qualify for them. So we spent structural funds very, very differently in the United Kingdom, and I think that's been to our detriment.
Lauren, you're so interesting.
Thanks.
You know so many things. Thank you very much.
She's like an encyclopedia, isn't she?
People who are watching and listening,